It was a long night. The dashboard clock flashed an eerie green 2:34 a.m., illuminating the exhausted faces of James, Melissa, Eric, and Caitlin. They had spent the weekend exploring ghost towns, seeking thrills from abandoned places and urban legends scattered along lonely highways. Now, exhausted and far from civilization, the friends drove silently through endless darkness. James suddenly broke the silence. "Guys, we're almost out of gas," he muttered anxiously, tapping on the trembling needle hovering dangerously close to empty. Melissa peered through the windshield, spotting a dimly lit sign flickering weakly ahead. "There's a gas station right there. Quick fuel," she said, a hint of relief in her voice. But as they pulled closer, the relief quickly faded. The gas station was clearly abandoned, rusted metal and cracked concrete greeting them ominously. The building stood like a forgotten relic, windows shattered, paint peeled, and shadows dancing in the flickering neon. Eric frowned, his voice tense. "We don't exactly have other options." As they stepped from the car, the cold night air bit sharply into their skin, carrying the scent of decay. A distant buzz from the dying neon sign blended with the unsettling silence. Melissa felt goosebumps crawling up her arms, a heavy feeling of dread coiling around her chest. James walked toward the pump, his footsteps echoing faintly against cracked asphalt. He reached for the nozzle, pulling the trigger cautiously. Thick, dark liquid splashed onto the pavement, far too dark to be gasoline. "It's blood," Eric whispered, staring at the dark crimson fluid dripping slowly from his fingers. Before anyone could react, a piercing scream sliced through the night, distant but unmistakably human. Their heads snapped toward the surrounding darkness. What was that? Caitlin whispered, panic seeping into her voice. "Maybe we shouldn't stay," James murmured, backing toward the car. But another scream, much closer this time, froze them in place. The crunch of footsteps echoed faintly from the shadows, accompanied by the chilling scrape of metal against pavement. Something was approaching. Melissa's heart pounded violently. "We have to run," she said urgently. The group bolted toward the dark woods behind the gas station, branches clawing at their skin, each snap of a twig feeling like a beacon for whoever, or whatever, was pursuing them. Suddenly, Caitlin stumbled, hitting something soft and wet. Her scream shattered the silence. A half-buried corpse, decaying and twisted grotesquely in the dirt, stared blankly back at her. They froze in terror, the horrifying realization dawning. This place was a trap. A slow, rhythmic scraping noise echoed behind them. Footsteps crunched deliberately, unhurried. Then came a low chuckle, bone-chillingly calm. Melissa ducked behind a thick tree, holding her breath, heart hammering painfully in her chest. She could see the shadowy figure emerge, tall and silent, holding something metallic that glistened in the pale moonlight. He paused, sniffing the air like an animal on a hunt. Come out, come out." His voice was gravelly, almost playful. A twig snapped somewhere nearby, and Melissa watched helplessly as Eric bolted from his hiding spot. The figure moved impossibly fast, catching Eric effortlessly, dragging him screaming into the darkness. The screams quickly became gurgles, then nothing. Melissa clamped a shaking hand over her mouth, tears burning her eyes. After agonizing moments, James appeared beside her, his face pale and smeared with dirt. "We have to run," he whispered desperately, pulling her away. But as they moved through the brush, James froze. Melissa turned to follow his gaze and felt her blood freeze. Eric's lifeless body dangled from a tree, throat slit, eyes staring emptily at them. The killer had hung him there like a morbid trophy, blood dripping steadily onto leaves below. Melissa felt bilirubin in her throat, struggling to stifle a scream. Then Caitlin's phone rang somewhere nearby. James hesitated, dread etched deeply on his face, then stepped forward slowly, picking up the phone from the blood-stained ground. He answered with trembling fingers, and an amused chuckle greeted them. "I'm glad you're enjoying my playground. Ready to play some more?" James dropped the phone in horror, grabbing Melissa's wrist and pulling her toward the highway, driven by pure adrenaline. But before they reached safety, a heavy thud and a wet, choking gasp erupted from behind. Melissa spun, horrified, as James collapsed onto the dirt, gasping weakly. The glistening blade protruded obscenely from his chest, his eyes wide and unblinking in shock. She stumbled backward, screaming, sprinting blindly toward the highway. Bright headlights suddenly appeared, illuminating her escape route like salvation. Melissa waved frantically, desperate relief washing over her as the truck slowed. But as the window rolled down, dread returned tenfold. A man smiled warmly from the driver's seat, but his eyes held something sinister, predatory. "Hop in," he drawled, voice calm and inviting, yet chillingly unnatural, his hands casually gripping the wheel. Wore dirty gloves smeared with dark, fresh blood. Behind her, footsteps crunched softly against gravel. She turned, wide-eyed and helpless. Another figure stepped slowly out of the shadows, calmly wiping a blade clean. "You were never meant to leave," the driver said softly, his eyes glittering darkly. "We always finish what we start." The door creaked open slowly, the sound echoing like a twisted invitation. Frozen with terror, Melissa realized she was trapped between two monsters who had perfected their deadly game long ago. And as darkness closed in, she knew one horrifying truth. This highway didn't lead anywhere but death, and she was already at the end of her road. The highway to Rattlesnake Bend doesn't exist on GPS. It's a forgotten scar of asphalt that cuts through the Nevada desert, lined with sun-bleached crosses and coyote bones. Claire spotted the town first, a cluster of trailers and boarded-up storefronts shimmering in the heat haze. "We just asked for directions," her boyfriend Jake said, knuckles white on the steering wheel. But the engine died with a death rattle a mile later, and the dust settled around them like a funeral shroud. That's when they heard the music. Tinny, distorted carnival tunes, drifting from nowhere. The motel's neon sign buzzed like a dying wasp. Vacancy bleeding to vacancy. The clerk, a gaunt woman with moth-wing hair, didn't blink as she slid a brass key across the desk. "Room 7, she croaked. "Don't answer the door after sundown." The room smelled of mildew and burnt sugar. Claire froze at the bathroom mirror. Someone had scratched "Hello, Claire" into the glass. Jake laughed it off. "Coincidence," he said, but neither mentioned the Polaroids they'd found under the bed. Grinning families, all dated 1987, their eyes scratched out. At midnight, the knocking began. Tap, tap. Claire peered through the peephole. The hallway was empty. Then a child's laughter bubbled up from the vents, followed by the wet snick of something sharp being dragged across the roof. The diner at dawn was a time capsule. Red vinyl booths cracked like dried blood. A waitress with a spiderweb tattoo served them coffee that reeked of ammonia. "You seen these girls?" Jake pointed to a wall, plastered with missing posters. "All teenagers, last seen near Rattlesnake Bend." The waitress dropped the pot. It shattered, and in the silence Claire heard it. The carnival music again, closer now. "You gotta leave," the waitress whispered. "They're watching." Outside, the deputy's cruiser idled. His smile didn't reach his hollow eyes. "Car trouble? Let's take a look." Jake followed him to the impound lot. Claire stayed behind, her skin prickling. The diner's jukebox suddenly blared to life, spewing that same warped melody, and beneath the counter she found it. A shrine of dolls made from human hair, their mouths stitched shut with fishing line. Jake didn't come back. Claire found the deputy's office empty, the walls papered with maps marked in red. Sacrifice sites, she realized, each pinned with a lock of hair. A filing cabinet groaned open, disgorging VHS tapes labeled 1987 Harvest Festival. The footage showed townsfolk dancing around a bonfire, their faces twisted with euphoria. Then the camera panned to a figure in a stag skull mask leading 6 girls in white dresses into the flames. The last girl turned to the lens, mouthing "Help us" before the screen fizzled to static. The deputy's voice slithered behind her. "You shouldn't have looked." They chased her into the desert. Flashlights bobbed like will-o-wisps as Claire stumbled into a ravine. There, half buried in the sand, was a school bus. Its roof peeled open like a tin can. Inside, 6 mummified bodies sat buckled into seats, their jaws unhinged in silent screams. A 7th seat was empty. The music swelled, deafening now. Shadows pooled around her, thickening into shapes. The missing girls, their faces melting like wax. "Join us," they chorused, their voices harmonizing with the deputies. The harvest needs 7. Claire ran until her lungs burned, but the town had vanished. Only the motel remained, room 7's light flickering. Inside, Jake sat on the bed, grinning. His teeth were blackened, his pupils swallowed by oily voids. "You're home now," he said, as the walls began to bleed. A month later, 2 hikers found Claire's journal, buried in the sand. The last entry read, "They're not human. The music hollows them out, fills them with whatever's in the dark." Jake's one of them now. I can hear the stagman singing. He says I'll make a good bride. Rattlesnake Bend still doesn't appear on map, but travelers swear they've seen it. A ghostly carnival glowing on the horizon, its Ferris wheel creaking under a bone-white moon. And if you listen close, you'll hear it too. A bride's muffled screams, harmonizing with an ancient hungry tune. Everyone has heard unsettling stories about roadside motels. Places nestled between nowhere and forgotten towns, where people disappear without a trace. Most dismiss them as urban legends or rumors spun by paranoid minds. But for the Harris family, those rumors became a nightmarish reality on a stormy August night. It was late, too late to keep driving, especially in a downpour. Heavy raindrops battered the windshield of the family's SUV, blurring visibility as thunder cracked across the sky, vibrating through their bones. The Johnson family, Daniel, his wife Claire, and their teenage twins, Jake and Olivia, had driven hundreds of miles, eager to reach their destination for vacation. Exhausted and anxious, they decided to pull into the first motel they saw. An old, flickering sign illuminating a vacancy beneath the rainstorm. Pineview Inn. The moment they pulled into the parking lot, something felt wrong. The neon vacancy sign buzzed and flickered erratically, casting unsettling red shadows that danced across the cracked pavement. Daniel squinted through the rain, uneasy at the motel's neglected appearance. Peeling paint, broken shutters, weeds pushing through cracks. But the family had no choice. Inside the lobby, the smell hit them immediately. A stale, pungent mixture of mildew and something metallic beneath it, like rusted iron. The elderly man at the reception desk wore a faded name tag that read Frank. His thinning gray hair clung to a gaunt face framed by sunken eyes. He smiled, revealing yellow teeth, eyeing the twins with an unsettling interest. "2 rooms, please," Daniel said cautiously, glancing nervously around the dim lobby. A worn carpet beneath their feet hid stains dark enough to suggest something grim beneath. The old man handed over keys, fingertips brushing Daniel's palm, cold and clammy, like touching a corpse. Daniel pulled his hand back quickly, suppressing a shiver. "Sleep tight," the old man whispered, a smile lingering a second too long. Their rooms 107 and 108, smelled musty and sour. Air thick as if no one had opened a window in years. Inside, faded floral wallpaper peeled away in strips, revealing dark blotches beneath. Claire grimaced, pulling back bed covers and exposing sheets stained with rust-colored marks. "Daniel, this isn't right," she whispered anxiously. But a deafening crack of thunder shook the building, followed immediately by darkness as power failed. Outside their door, footsteps hurried down the hallway, heavy and purposeful. Daniel quickly opened the door, looking into the dark corridor, now only lit sporadically by lightning flashes. At the far end of the hall stood a figure, barely visible in brief, flashing glimpses, silent and unmoving, head tilted oddly to one side. "Dad," one of the twins whispered, fear tight in their throat. Suddenly, the figure darted away, footsteps pounding down the hall, fading into silence. Daniel slammed the door shut, locking it with trembling hands. "We'll leave at sunrise," he reassured his terrified family. But the uneasy dread refused to fade. Sleep came reluctantly, Daniel tossed and turned in restless dreams filled with pale faces, silent screams, and shadowy figures looming over the bed. A scraping noise woke him abruptly at 3:07 a.m. Someone scratching at their window. Daniel crept slowly forward, heart hammering, pulling back the curtain. No one, but outside. Faint whispers carried by wind seeped through the window cracks, barely audible. Leave now, before he finds you. Daniel jerked backward, turning quickly to find Claire awake, wide-eyed and pale. Did you hear? A scream tore through the night, cutting off Claire's reply. Daniel threw open their connecting door, heart seizing as he saw the twins' door wide open. He sprinted outside, Claire close behind, rain pelting them mercilessly. Screams filled the air. Terrified, unmistakably their children's. Daniel burst into the twins' room, freezing in horror. The window was shattered. Bloodied glass littered across the floor. The twins were gone, only a crimson smear left behind on soaked sheets. Daniel stumbled back outside, screaming their names desperately. The wind swallowed his voice, mocking him with silence. Through the pounding rain, Claire pointed toward the woods behind the motel. In the distant trees, something moved rapidly. Dark figures dragging struggling silhouettes. Lightning illuminated their frantic chase, trees reaching out to claw at them like twisted fingers. Claire tripped, landing in thick mud, face inches from something pale sticking from the earth. A skeletal hand partially unearthed by the rain. She shrieked, recoiling violently. Daniel hauled her up, but a low, animalistic chuckle echoed behind them, freezing them both in place. They turned slowly, standing in the shadows, eyes gleaming hungrily. Was the motel owner, grinning grotesquely, clutching something metallic dripping wetly in his gloved hand. Behind him, dozens of shallow graves emerged from the mud, unearthed by the storm. Each grave marked crudely with twisted crosses. You shouldn't have stopped here, Frank whispered calmly, stepping closer, rain streaming down his face, washing away layers of dirt and blood, revealing a madman's eyes burning with anticipation. Where are my kids? Daniel shouted, voice cracking in desperation. Frank smiled wider. Safe, for now, but the storm demands a price. A sudden scream tore through the woods. Claire's heart sank. The twins! Run! Daniel hissed urgently, charging Frank head-on. A struggle ensued, brutal and frantic. Frank laughed maniacally as Daniel tackled him, both falling to the ground, mud and blood mixing violently beneath them. Claire sprinted toward the scream, stumbling through thick branches until she found a dilapidated shed hidden in shadows. Pushing the door open slowly, Claire gasped. Jake and Emma sat bound, eyes wide with terror, but behind them hung dozens of photographs, blurred Polaroids capturing twisted faces of past victims, frozen forever in terror. Mom, Emma sobbed hysterically, desperately squirming against tight ropes. Claire rushed to free them, her fingers slipping on knots slick with blood. Suddenly, footsteps approached, heavy boots crunching gravel. Frank appeared in the doorway, clutching a dripping blade. Claire whirled around, shielding her children with shaking arms. You've seen too much, Frank said gently, stepping forward, each footfall creaking ominously. I never intended to hurt anyone. They just wouldn't stop screaming. Claire searched desperately for escape as Frank approached slowly, blade glinting darkly. Daniel burst through the doorway just in time, tackling Frank violently to the floor. The knife flew from Frank's hand, clattering loudly onto the wooden floor. Run! Daniel shouted, wrestling the killer to the ground. Claire tore the bindings from her children, rushing them into the stormy night, running blindly. They heard Daniel cry out behind them, abruptly silenced by a sickening thud. As headlights illuminated the highway, Claire flagged down a passing car, collapsing in sobs. The police later discovered a horrific truth hidden beneath Quick Fuel Motel. 37 bodies buried beneath floorboards, walls, and shallow graves around the property. Frank, a former psychiatric patient turned motel owner, had spent decades collecting travelers like trophies. Yet, weeks later, Claire received a letter. No return address. Only a single photograph inside. Daniel's lifeless body sitting propped against motel room #13. Vacant eyes staring blankly forward. Written neatly across the back in blood-red ink was a single line. See you again soon. Claire realized with icy dread that Frank had never been captured. The nightmare wasn't over. It had just begun. Everyone has heard stories about hitchhikers. Strange passengers who vanish without explanation, or worse, those who have murderous intentions hidden behind innocent smiles. But you never truly expect those stories to happen to you. For the Blake family, John, his wife Emily, and their two kids, 16-year-old Rachel and 11-year-old Tommy, a late-night drive down Route 23 changed their lives forever. It started innocently enough. A family vacation through rural America. Miles of cornfields rolled past the windows, the road stretching endlessly beneath a heavy, darkening sky. Daniel Blake, a quiet, cautious man, drove silently. Beside him, his wife Sarah scrolled through her phone, while their kids, Jenny, 16, and Kyle, 12, fought boredom in the back seat. Nightfall had brought thick, suffocating darkness, broken occasionally by flickering streetlights. Daniel rubbed his tired eyes, squinting into the darkness. The gas needle hovered uncomfortably low, and ahead loomed a sign, Rest Easy Motel and Gas, next exit. As they turned onto the exit ramp, headlights illuminated a lone figure standing by the roadside, thumb extended. Daniel instinctively slowed down. Daniel, don't... Sarah started nervously, but the figure stepped into the headlights. A young man, mid-20s, soaking wet from recent rain, his clothes ragged and filthy. His eyes were wide, pleading, frantic. Please, he called through the open window, voice shaking. I've been out here for hours. My car broke down miles back. I just need a ride to the next town. Unease gnawed at Daniel, but he hesitated. The storm intensified, raindrops pelting harder against the windshield. Reluctantly, he nodded. Hop in. As the stranger climbed into the back seat, Jenny slid closer to her younger brother, uneasy. Thank you, the man whispered hoarsely. My name's Ethan. But Daniel couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. Ethan's clothes were ragged, muddy, and his eyes, reflected briefly in the rearview mirror, appeared strangely hollow, haunted. The silence in the car felt oppressive. Daniel switched on the radio, static crackling before abruptly going dead. Ethan's quiet voice broke the awkward silence. You folks heading far? Just passing through? Daniel replied cautiously, feeling the hair rise on his neck. An uncomfortable silence returned. Daniel glanced in the mirror, catching Ethan staring intently at Jenny, his gaze unsettling. Daniel's grip tightened on the wheel. He was about to say something when Ethan spoke again, voice strangely flat. Did you hear about the murders? Daniel froze. Excuse me? The murders. People go missing around here. Travelers mostly. Cops never find the bodies, Ethan explained calmly, his voice distant, emotionless. Sarah shot Daniel a frightened look. Sounds like just an urban legend. Ethan chuckled softly, leaning back into the seat. Legends always have a kernel of truth. Daniel pressed harder on the accelerator, anxiety gnawing at his gut. They pulled into the dimly lit gas station beside the small motel. Flickering fluorescent lights buzzed above rusty pumps and boarded-up windows. Daniel turned to Ethan. We're stopping here. The stranger smiled coldly. I'll wait in the car. Daniel stepped out, walking briskly toward the station. Inside, the attendant watched nervously as Daniel paid for gas. Something wrong? Daniel asked the attendant quietly, noticing the man's anxious glances toward their car. The attendant leaned closer, whispering urgently. You traveling alone? My family's outside, Daniel answered. Dread rising. Listen carefully, the attendant said, voice shaking. Police radio just announced a manhunt. Dangerous guy. Dangerous guy. Hitchhiking killer. Leaves no survivors. Been picking families, young girls especially. Daniel's blood froze, heart pounding. He spun toward his vehicle, but Ethan was gone. The back door wide open, rain flooding in. Panicked, Daniel sprinted toward the car. Where's Ethan? He shouted. Sarah turned, eyes wide with panic. He said he'd get snacks from the store. Realization hit Daniel like a punch. He's lying. He's dangerous. But Daniel's voice was drowned out by Sarah's sudden scream. Ethan stood behind Jenny, knife glinting sharply beneath the flickering street lamp, blade pressed lightly to her throat. Nobody move, Ethan hissed calmly. Jenny whimpered, eyes wide with terror. Ethan smiled coldly. You shouldn't trust strangers. Let her go, Daniel pleaded desperately, voice trembling. Too late for that, Ethan murmured, pressing the blade slightly, drawing a thin trickle of blood. From the distance came the wail of approaching sirens. Ethan stiffened momentarily. Distracted, Daniel lunged forward, wrestling him away from Jenny. The knife fell, skittering across the wet pavement. Run, Daniel screamed. Sarah grabbed the children, sprinting toward the motel lobby. Ethan twisted free, delivering a brutal punch to Daniel's jaw. Disoriented, Daniel stumbled backward, vision blurring as Ethan vanished into the shadows behind the gas station. Heart pounding, Daniel staggered toward his family, joining them inside the rundown motel lobby, breathlessly. They begged the elderly receptionist to lock the doors. He found you, she whispered, trembling visibly. What are you talking about? Sarah demanded, panic-stricken. The old woman hesitated before continuing in a frightened whisper. He used to work here. We thought he disappeared after the killings. Daniel's blood turned cold. What killings? She pointed silently to faded newspaper clippings pinned to the wall behind the counter. Headlines screaming, 5 murdered at roadside motel, alongside grainy photos of Ethan smiling eerily beside victims whose faces were twisted in agony. A loud crash echoed from the back door. Ethan's distorted voice called mockingly. I told you, legends have truth. The family huddled together as the receptionist fumbled desperately beneath her desk, pulling out a shotgun, her hands shaking. Stay quiet, she whispered, eyes wide and fearful. Glass shattered loudly. Footsteps crunched slowly over broken shards. Ethan's heavy breathing drew closer, humming softly to himself, almost playfully. Come out, friends. We're just getting started. A sudden silence fell, oppressive and suffocating. Then a sharp click echoed. The shotgun misfired. The receptionist froze, eyes widening. Ethan lunged from the shadows, grabbing her from behind. Her scream ended abruptly with a sickening snap. The family bolted desperately toward their car, rain blinding them, hearts pounding painfully. Ethan appeared from nowhere, blocking their path, smiling through bloody teeth. There's nowhere left to run, he hissed softly, advancing slowly, knife gleaming beneath the harsh headlights. Just as Ethan lunged forward, gunshots cracked sharply through the air, dropping him instantly to the ground. Police cars skidded into the parking lot, red and blue lights illuminating the nightmare. Officers rushed forward, weapons drawn, as Ethan lay bleeding on the pavement. He whispered, chillingly through labored breaths, I'll see you. Again, the Blakes stood frozen, rain pouring over them, mixing with blood pooling at their feet. Hours later, police uncovered bodies beneath the motel's foundation. Ethan had returned to finish what he'd started years ago. Weeks passed, yet nightmares persisted. But one night, Jenny's phone buzzed ominously. An unknown number flashed, followed by a message. Legends never truly die. Jenny dropped the phone in horror, heart racing, realizing Ethan's story wasn't over. it was only beginning. Because real evil never truly dies. It just waits patiently in the dark. The GPS died 5 miles outside Mercy's End, Nebraska, population 87, according to the sun-bleached sign dangling by one screw. Mia rolled down the window, but the July heat offered no relief. Just ask for directions, her fiancé, Ben, said, though the road ahead rippled like a mirage, swallowing the horizon. The first house they passed had its windows boarded shut with plywood scrawled in red. Leave now. Ben laughed nervously. Mia didn't. She'd already counted 7 pairs of eyes peering through fences, their owners motionless as mannequins. None blinked. The general store smelled of mothballs and rotting meat. A bell jingled as they entered, but the clerk didn't look up. He polished the same spot on the counter, his hands gloved in peeling leather. "Car trouble?" Ben asked. The man's head swiveled slowly, his neck creaking like old hinges. His lips were stitched shut with coarse black thread. Mia backed into a shelf, sending jars clattering. Their labels read pickled hearts in shaky cursive. Inside, fleshy lumps floated in amber liquid. Ben grabbed her arm. "We're leaving." Outside, the street was empty. Wind chimes made of animal bones clattered, and the church bell tolled once, a deep, rotting sound. From the cemetery across the road, a figure in a tattered wedding dress watched them, her face a blur of maggots. The motel key was warm, as if someone had clutched it for hours. Room 3's wallpaper curled like dead skin, revealing bloodstains in the shape of handprints. Mia froze at the bathroom sink. The mirror reflected the room behind her, empty. But when she turned, Ben stood in the doorway, his eyes glassy. "Did you hear that?" he whispered. Thump, thump. It came from under the bed. Ben lifted the dust ruffle. A child's doll lay there, its porcelain face cracked, mouth sewn shut with the same black thread. Its dress was stained with something dark and sticky. "It's a prank," Ben said, voice trembling. But Mia noticed the doll's chest rising and falling, as if breathing. Dinner at the town's lone diner was worse. The waitress slid a plate of gray meat toward them, her own mouth stitched into a permanent smile. Ben pushed it away. "We just need a tow truck." The waitress tilted her head, then pointed to a photo on the wall. A 1950s family, their mouths sewn shut, standing beside a bonfire of suitcases and license plates. The lights flickered. When they steadied, the diner was empty, except for the doll from their room, now perched on the counter. Its thread snapped, the mouth unspooling to reveal rows of needle-sharp teeth. They ran. The street lamps hissed out one by one, plunging Mercy's End into darkness. Behind them, the bone chimes erupted into frenzied music. The church door groaned open. Inside, pews faced a massive effigy of a faceless saint, its hands cupping a fire pit filled with ashes. Ben's flashlight caught the walls. Polaroids of hundreds of travelers, their mouths sewn, dates scrawled beneath. The newest was theirs, taken outside the motel. "We need to go. Now," Mia hissed. But the doors slammed shut. The effigy's head turned, hollow eyes glowing. Queer voices, rasping, wet, swelled from the basement. "Hush, little stranger, don't scream or cry. We'll stitch your lips so you never lie." Ben pried open a boarded window. Outside, the entire town stood waiting, mouths split open by ragged stitches, throats humming that cursed lullaby. State troopers found Ben's Jeep abandoned at the county line, the GPS blinking, recalculating. Endlessly, Mia's phone lay in the dirt, its last video, a shaky clip of Ben sprinting through cornfields, screaming, "They're not people! They're not!" before static swallowed the audio. Mercy's End still isn't on any map, but late at night, truckers on Highway 87 swear they see things. A doll nailed to a telephone pole, its mouth gaping in a silent scream, or a woman in a rotted wedding dress, holding a spool of black thread. And if you ever hear bone chimes in the wind, run. Don't look back. Don't scream. They say never pick up hitchhikers. It's the kind of warning whispered around campfires, meant to scare restless teenagers and keep travelers wary. But nobody ever thinks it'll happen to them, least of all my family. We never imagined how quickly kindness could turn into terror. It happened in the summer of '98. We were heading west on a long drive through endless highways of South Dakota toward a reunion in Montana. The air was thick and heavy, the setting sun melting into a deep, blood-red horizon. Miles of nothing stretched out before us, just empty fields dotted with skeletal trees twisted into grotesque shapes by the wind. Occasionally, a dilapidated barn or abandoned farmhouse stood out like gravestones against the fading light. We passed a rusted sign. Welcome to Red Rock. Population 112. My younger sister, Jamie, shivered in the back seat, though the heat was stifling. Dad squinted into the dying sunlight, tiredly gripping the steering wheel. Mom stared blankly at the map, murmuring something about missing our turn. Then we saw him. He appeared from nowhere, standing on the side of the road with his thumb out, a lone figure bathed in the dying sunlight. His face was partially hidden beneath a hooded jacket, but I caught a glimpse of his eyes, intense, unblinking, desperate. Dad slowed down instinctively. He might need help, he muttered, glancing at Mom, who frowned uncertainly. My stomach twisted, an inexplicable dread crawling under my skin. Dad, please, let's just keep going, I whispered. But it was too late. Dad pulled to a stop, gravel crunching beneath the tires. The stranger approached slowly, stepping from shadow into harsh light. I noticed something dark staining his clothes. Dirt, maybe oil, I told myself, even as my mind conjured worse possibilities. Thanks for stopping, he said softly, his voice oddly calm yet carrying an underlying tension. I thought I'd never see another car out here. He climbed into the seat next to Jamie, and for a brief moment he smiled. It wasn't a grateful smile. It was something cold, measured, as if he knew a secret he couldn't wait to share. As we pulled away, the car seemed smaller, the air thicker, the silence sharper. Name's Jack, he finally said, his voice like gravel. Heading anywhere special? Just passing through, Dad answered quickly, eyes fixed ahead. I glanced back, noticing Jamie edging away from him, her knuckles white as she gripped her Walkman tightly. He stared straight ahead, but occasionally his eyes shifted toward her, lingering too long. Mind if I turn on the radio? Mind if I turn on the radio? He asked suddenly, reaching forward before waiting for an answer. Static burst through the speakers, followed by fragments of distorted voices. I caught words between the static. Escaped. Dangerous. Multiple murders. Jack quickly turned it off, laughing dryly. Nothing good on tonight, he murmured, his voice low. My heart raced as Mom's eyes met mine in the mirror, wide and terrified. Dad's hands shook slightly on the wheel. A loud bang exploded beneath the car, and we skidded violently to the side of the road, stopping inches from a deep ditch. Flat tire, Dad said, trying to mask the fear in his voice. He glanced at Jack nervously. Wait here. Dad stepped out into darkness, flashlight shaking as he opened the trunk. Jack didn't move. He just stared forward, lips twitching into an unsettling grin. Jamie whimpered softly, squeezing closer to the window. Minutes passed in oppressive silence before a faint scraping echoed from beneath the car. Then another sound, a sickening crunch followed by Dad's scream, muffled by the night. Mom gasped, fumbling for the door, but Jack grabbed her arm, his grip vice-like. I wouldn't do that, he whispered, voice cold as ice. In his other hand, something metallic glinted, a knife blade stained dark. Please, Mom pleaded weakly. Shh, he whispered gently, placing the knife against her throat. Don't scream. Suddenly, the car rocked violently. Dad stumbled into view, blood running down his forehead, eyes wild with panic. "Run!" he shouted desperately, hammering his fists against the window. Jack lunged forward, and chaos erupted. Mom screamed as Jamie frantically unlocked her door, tumbling into the roadside dirt. Jack shoved past me, chasing after her, his movements eerily swift. In blind panic, I raced outside, following them into the darkness. Twigs snapped beneath my feet, branches clawed at my skin. Shadows danced under the moonlight, distorting reality. Jamie's terrified screams pierced the night, growing distant. I burst through dense trees into a clearing and froze. Jamie lay motionless in the grass, eyes staring blankly at the stars. Blood pooled around her, glistening black beneath moonlight. Above her stood Jack, blade dripping, eyes locked onto mine. "You shouldn't have stopped," he murmured softly, almost apologetically. From behind, I heard my mother sobbing, calling Jamie's name over and over. Dad shouted frantically somewhere in the woods, hopelessly lost. Jack stepped closer and I backed away, heart pounding in my ears. "Please," I whispered, voice trembling, vision blurred by tears. He tilted his head curiously, as if deciding something. "I'll give you a head start," he said gently, lifting his finger to his lips. "Shh. Run now." I stumbled backward, heart pounding, then turned and sprinted through the night. Branches tore my clothes, rocks sliced my feet, but nothing compared to the chilling laughter echoing behind me, chasing me through the darkness. Eventually, lights appeared in the distance, headlights slicing through darkness. I ran toward the road, waving frantically. Tires screeched, voices shouted. The last thing I saw before blackness consumed me was a police officer's flashlight illuminating my parents' faces, battered and broken, but alive. In the days that followed, we learned Jack's true identity, an escaped convict, a fugitive wanted for multiple gruesome killings along the interstate. He targeted families, luring them into darkness before leaving behind only blood-soaked crime scenes. They found Jamie's body hours later, abandoned in that lonely clearing, posed carefully beneath the stars. Jack was gone, leaving no trace except his blood-stained knife driven deep into the earth beside her. A twisted signature. Weeks passed. Our grief became a numb ache, our trauma a living nightmare. One night, sitting alone in my room, the radio turned itself on. Static crackled before resolving into a clear, chilling whisper. His voice, "You shouldn't have stopped." I froze, staring at the glowing dial in disbelief. Before I could move, a soft tapping sounded from outside my window. Slowly, I turned, heart thudding painfully. In the moonlight stood a figure, hood drawn up, eyes gleaming with familiar, unholy anticipation. Jack was smiling again. The nightmare had ended that night on the highway. It had only just begun.